I didn't want a wife. I wanted a merger. I've spent my entire life building Vance Global into a fortress, and I didn't do it by being sentimental. But my grandmother had a sense of humor that reached from beyond the grave. Her will was clear: get married by my 33rd birthday or lose the controlling shares to my half-brother Silas. Silas is a parasite. If he gets his hands on this company, he'll strip it and sell the pieces before I can even pack my desk. I had 3 weeks. I didn't need a partner or a soulmate. I needed an employee. Someone desperate enough to sign a contract, play the part for a year, and disappear with a check when the divorce papers were filed. I found her in a coffee shop downtown. She was messy. Paint stains on her fingers, hair escaping her ponytail, and an apron that had seen better days. But she was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. I'd been watching her for a week. I knew her father's medical bills were piling up. I knew she was 3 months behind on rent. She was drowning, and I was the only one with a life raft. I sat at the corner table and waited. When she finally brought my black coffee, her hand was shaking. A drop splashed onto the table. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, reaching for a napkin with those paint-stained fingers. I didn't move. I just watched her. "Sit down, Maya." She froze, looking around like she was waiting for her manager to save her. "I'm working, sir. I can't just—" "I bought the shop 10 minutes ago," I interrupted. My voice was flat, letting the power of the statement sink in. "Your manager works for me now. So do you. Sit." She sat. Her heart was beating so hard I could see the pulse in her throat. I liked it. It meant she knew I held her life in my hands. I slid the envelope across the table. It was thick, heavy with the weight of her future. "My name is Julian Vance," I said. "I know about the debt. I know about your father. Yeah, I have a business proposition for you." She looked at the marriage license inside and actually laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "You're insane. You think you can just buy a person?" "I can buy anything, Maya." I leaned forward, letting her feel the shadow I cast over her. "The question is, do you have a price? Or are you going to let your father lose his house because of your pride?" I saw the moment she broke. The defiance in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by the cold reality of her situation. "1 year," she whispered. 365 days, I told her. Strictly business, no emotions, and absolutely no touching unless there are cameras present. She picked up the pen. Her hand wasn't shaking anymore. She signed her name with a flourish, then looked me dead in the eye. "Fine, I'll marry you, Julian, but don't expect me to like it." I took the papers back and smirked. It was the first time I'd felt a spark of genuine interest in weeks. "I don't pay you to like it, Maya," I told her, my voice dropping an octave. "I pay you to be mine." 3 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of the bridal suite, watching the stranger I had bought. Maya was staring into the mirror, and for a second, I didn't recognize her. The paint stains were gone, replaced by a custom silk gown that clung to her curves like it was painted on. Diamonds, my diamonds, hung from her ears, catching the light. She looked like a queen. But the way she was clutching the vanity told me she felt like a prisoner. "You're shaking," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. She spun around, her eyes wide. I wasn't supposed to be there. Superstition says it's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony. But I didn't believe in luck. I believed in control. "I'm not shaking," she lied, though I could see the fine tremor in her hands. "I'm just reconsidering the terms of my employment." I walked toward her, the click of my shoes on the marble the only sound. I stopped right behind her. In the mirror, we looked like the perfect couple, the billionaire and his prize. I reached out, my fingers brushing her neck as I adjusted the heavy diamond necklace. Her skin was electric. A shiver ran through her, and I felt a surge of something dark and possessive. "Too late for cold feet, Maya," I whispered near her ear. "The board of directors is waiting. My grandmother is watching. Now, put on your mask. It's time to go to work." The vows were a hollow performance, but the crowd ate it up. By the time we reached the reception, I had to peel myself away to handle a senator who held the keys to my next project. I left Maya alone for 5 minutes. That was my mistake. When I turned back, I saw him, Silas. My half-brother had her cornered near the champagne fountain. He was leaning into her space, his hand gripping her bare arm a little too tight. Faj and I knew that look on his face. He was hunting for a weakness. He was trying to find the crack in our story. I didn't think. I just moved. I cut through the crowd like a blade. As I got closer, I heard Silas's oily voice. "How much did he pay you, Maya?" he whispered. "Whatever it is, I'll double it. Just walk out now and leave him with nothing." Maya lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the way she was trembling. "I love him. That's something you wouldn't understand." Silas sneered, his grip tightening. "You're a bad liar, street rat, and when he's bored of you, get your hand off my wife." The words came out of me low and lethal. Silas froze. He let go of her arm like it had suddenly turned to fire. I stepped between them, my shoulder hitting Silas's chest, forcing him back. I didn't care who was watching. I didn't care about the press. "Julian," Silas said, trying to force a smile, "just welcoming the newest Vance." "Touch her again," I said, saw my voice vibrating with a rage that surprised even me. "And you won't have a hand left to hold a drink. Am I clear?" Silas turned pale. He looked at me, then at Maya, realizing the game had changed. He backed away into the shadows without another word. I turned to Maya. Her arm was red where he had grabbed her. I reached out and pulled her flush against me. It wasn't for the cameras this time. It was an instinct. "He knows, Julian," she whispered, her breath hot against my chest. He offered to buy me out." "He can't buy you," I growled, my hand sliding down to the small of her back, pinning her to me. "Why not?" she challenged, looking up at me with those defiant eyes. "Because of the contract?" I looked down at her lips. The music, the lights, the mission, it all blurred into the background. All I could see was her. "Because you belong to me now," I said, my voice dropping to a rough growl. "And I don't share what's mine." I didn't wait for the cameras. I crushed my mouth to hers. It was supposed to be a show, but the way she leaned into me, the way her hands clutched my jacket, that wasn't in the contract. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care about the fine print. The flight to Lake Como was a tomb of silence. Maya sat across from me, her forehead pressed against the cold glass of the window, staring into the blackness of the Atlantic. She'd already stripped off the diamonds. The earrings and the necklace sat on the mahogany table between us like discarded bait. She looked small in her oversized sweater, a far cry from the ice queen I'd paraded in front of the cameras hours ago. I couldn't stop looking at her, specifically, her mouth. That kiss at the reception. It was supposed to be a tactical strike, a message to Silas to back off. But the moment her lips parted, the moment I felt her hands bunch the fabric of my tuxedo jacket, the tactics evaporated. For 5 seconds, I wasn't a CEO protecting an asset. I was a man who wanted to lock the doors and never let her go. "Stop staring at me," she said, her voice barely a whisper against the glass. "I'm not staring," I lied, shifting my gaze to my tablet. "I'm reviewing the morning's press clippings." "You're lying," she countered, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were rimmed with red, exhausted but sharp enough to cut. "You're wondering if Silas is right. You're wondering if I'm just a liability you can't control." "Silas is a vulture," I said, my voice hardening, "and you held your own. Most people crumble under his stare." "I grew up dodging landlords and debt collectors, Julian," she said, a bitter smile touching her lips. "A man in a custom suit doesn't scare me." "I bet I could scare you," I thought darkly, my eyes tracking the pulse in her neck. "So I bet I could make you feel things that would haunt you for a lifetime." I forced the thought down. "Business, Vance. Keep it business." The car pulled up to the villa, a fortress of ivy and ancient stone, perched on the edge of the Black Lake. It was my grandmother's favorite retreat, a place meant for romance, not contracts. We walked into the grand foyer. It was empty. I dismissed the staff for privacy to sell the act. On the entry table sat a single cream-colored envelope. I recognized the elegant, spindly handwriting immediately. Grandmother Rose. I opened it, and my jaw tightened as I read the words. "Dear Julian, a legacy is built in the bedroom, not the boardroom. I've ordered the guest wings closed for renovation. The master suite is prepared. Don't disappoint me." The old woman was playing matchmaker from her nursing home. She was forcing my hand. "What is it?" Maya asked, trying to peer over my shoulder. "There are no guest rooms," I said, mid-crumpling the note in my fist. "My grandmother has intervened." Maya's eyes went wide, reflecting the lightning outside. "So, where do I sleep?" I looked at the sweeping marble staircase leading to the dark upper floor. With me. The room was a trap. One bed, one massive, silk-covered island in the middle of a sea of shadows. Maya stood by the heavy oak door, hugging her arms as if she were freezing. She wasn't looking at the room. She was looking at me. Her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. "I can sleep on the sofa," she blurted out, pointing to a small velvet settee near the fireplace. "Don't be ridiculous," I snapped, unbuttoning my cuffs. The tension in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. "The settee is an antique and about as comfortable as a rock. You take the bed." "And you?" "I'll take the other side," I said, my voice dropping an octave as I stepped toward her. "It's a king size, Maya, but we can sleep without touching, unless you're afraid you can't keep your hands off me." She flinched, then narrowed her eyes. She walked to the bed and sat on the edge, the mattress dipping under her weight. "Julian," she whispered into the firelight. I paused, my shirt half unbuttoned, my pulse thudding in my ears. "What?" "Why did you kiss me like that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "At the reception." Silas was already walking away. "You didn't have to, make it real." I walked over to her. I didn't sit. I stood over her, my shadow stretching across the bed, pinning her down. "You're right," I admitted, my voice a low growl. "I didn't have to." I reached out, my thumb catching her chin and tilting her face up to mine. Her pupils dilated until her eyes were almost entirely black. "I did it because you looked terrified," I lied, though the lie felt like ash in my mouth. "And because for a moment, I wanted to see if you'd fight me." "It's just a contract, Julian," she whispered, her breath hitching as I leaned closer. "Then why is your heart racing, Maya?" I brushed my thumb over her bottom lip. She shivered, her eyes fluttering shut. I could have had her then. I could have broken the only rule that mattered. I pulled back, my teeth gritted. The willpower it took to walk away felt like a physical weight. "Get some sleep," I ordered, turning my back on her and walking toward the balcony. "We have a long year ahead of us." I stepped out into the rain, letting the freezing water soak through my shirt. I needed the cold, because if I'd stayed in that room for one more minute, I would have burned the contract and her along with it. We survived the night. Barely. I spent the hours before dawn on my side of the mattress, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. Every time she shifted, the scent of her vanilla shampoo drifted over to me, a quiet taunt in the dark. I woke up with a headache and a mood as black as the coffee I was drinking. "We need photos," I told her at breakfast, my eyes fixed on my tablet. "The paparazzi are camped across the lake with long-range lenses. If we don't look like we're in love, Silas will start whispering estrangement before the week is out." Maya looked at me over her cup. She looked exhausted. Her hair messy in a way that made me want to reach out and touch it. "Fine," she said, her voice dry. "Let's go for a romantic stroll. Let's pretend we can stand each other." We walked down toward the water. The path was a death trap, ancient Italian stone, slick with last night's storm and coated in green moss. I stayed a few paces ahead, my hands in my pockets, checking the perimeter. "Watch your step," I warned, my voice flat. "These stones are older than the country." "I'm fine." Julian," she snapped, dodging a puddle. "Stop managing me. I've been walking on my own for 26 years. "I'm protecting my investment," I shot back, stopping to look at her. "I can't have a wife in a cast for the gala next Tuesday. It ruins the aesthetic." She stopped dead. Her eyes flashed with a sudden, sharp anger that made me regret the words the moment they left my mouth. "Is that all I am?" she demanded, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "An investment? So a prop for your portfolio?" "You signed the contract, Maya," I said, my voice turning to ice to hide the guilt. "Don't go looking for sentimentality now. It wasn't in the budget." She flinched as if I'd struck her. She turned away, her movements hurried and reckless on the wet stone. "I hate you," she muttered, taking a quick step down. "Maya, wait." It happened in a heartbeat. Her heel caught on a patch of slick moss. Her foot twisted at a sickening angle. Bea and I heard her gasp as she pitched forward, right toward the jagged rocky edge of the path. "Maya," I didn't think. There was no investment in my mind then. There was only the terrifying sight of her falling. I lunged, my shoes skidding on the stone. I caught her around the waist, just as she was going over. I pulled her back with everything I had, my own back slamming into the stone wall of the cliff to break her fall. She landed on top of me, her chest heaving, then her hands clutching my shirt as if it were the only solid thing in the world. "I've got you," I gasped, my arms locked around her. "I've got you." For a long minute, we just lay there in the mist. I could feel her heart hammering against my ribs, a wild, frantic rhythm. She looked up at me, her face pale and her eyes wide with shock. Then she winced, a sob catching in her throat as she tried to shift her leg. "My ankle," she whispered, tears already blurring her vision. I think it's broken." I sat up, moving her with a gentleness I didn't know I possessed. I looked at her ankle. It was already turning an ugly shade of purple and swelling fast. "You're not walking on that," I said, my voice rough. "I have to," she grit out, trying to push herself up. "I'm not staying down here." "No," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I stood up and swept her into my arms. "Put me down," she protested, weakly hitting my shoulder. "Cecil, I'm too heavy for this." "You're as light as a feather," I grunted, shifting her weight so she was secure. "Now stop fighting me and hold on." She went quiet then. She wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face in the crook of my shoulder to hide the pain. I carried her all the way back up the cliff, past the gardens, and through the grand doors of the villa. I didn't feel the strain in my muscles. I only felt the crushing realization that when I saw her slip, so I hadn't been thinking about the company. I'd been thinking that my world was about to end. I laid her on the bed, moving with more care than I'd ever used in my life. I grabbed the ice bucket from the bar and wrapped the cubes in a fresh silk towel. Then I did something I had never done for anyone. I knelt at her feet. "This is going to be cold," I warned, my voice low. I placed the ice on her ankle. She hissed, her fingers digging into the expensive sheets. "I'm sorry," I said. "Well, and for the first time, I meant it." I looked up at her. Her hair was a mess. Her cheeks were flushed with feverish pain, and she looked so vulnerable, it made my chest ache. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could have called the maids. You could have called a doctor." "I don't want anyone else touching you," I said. The truth slipped out before I could stop it. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine. "You were scared," she whispered. "On the cliff. I saw your face, Julian. You weren't worried about your investment." "I was shocked," I lied, looking back down at her foot. "That's all?" "Liar," she said softly. She reached out, her fingers tentative as they brushed through my hair. I froze. Her touch was undoing years of discipline in a single second. "You aren't as cold as you pretend to be," she said. I looked at where I was, on my knees. The man who bowed to no one, kneeling before a girl with nothing. I stood up abruptly, and the chair scraping against the floor. "Rest," I ordered, my voice harsh to cover the tremor in my soul. "I'll have dinner brought up." I walked out, but I only made it to the hallway. I leaned against the heavy oak door, my hand over my heart, trying to remember how to breathe. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Silas. "Saw the photos of you carrying her. Touching. But I just found something very interesting about her father's history. Call me, brother, before I call the press." I stared at the screen, my grip tightening until the glass groaned. Silas was digging. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid for the Vance name. I was afraid for her. I stood by the window, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm against the glass. In my hand, the phone felt like a live wire. "I don't care what you found, Silas," I growled into the receiver. "Leave her out of this." My brother's voice was like oil over silk. "The debt is paid, Julian, but the scandal, Ipada Vance marrying a girl whose father was a disgraced accountant? The board will have a field day. They'll call it a lapse in judgment. They'll call you compromised. If you breathe a word to the press, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more dangerous than a shout, I will ruin you. I won't just take the company. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. I'll bury you so deep, you'll forget what sunlight looks like. I slammed the phone down on the mahogany desk. My pulse was thundering. I looked like a man who had just declared war because I had. Julian. The whisper came from the doorway. I spun around. Maya was standing there, leaning heavily against the doorframe, her face pale in the shadows. You should be in bed, I said, moving toward her instantly. I didn't even ask. I swept her up into my arms again. She felt lighter this time, more fragile. Silas knows, she whispered, her hands trembling as I carried her to the large leather armchair by the fire. He's going to tell everyone I'm a fraud. He's going to tell them you bought me. I set her down, but I didn't pull away. I stayed close, my hands on the arms of the chair, pinning her in. Let him, I said. Let him say whatever he wants. But the contract, she argued, her eyes wide with fear. The inheritance. If they find out it's fake, you lose everything, Julian. You lose the legacy. I looked at her. You'd really looked at her. For the first time in my life, the ice in my chest was completely gone. It was replaced by a heat that made my heart stop. Then let it go, I said quietly. She gasped. You'd give up the company for me? I've spent my whole life building walls, Maya. I thought the company was my legacy. I thought money was my protection. I reached out, my thumb grazing her cheek, tracing the line of a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. But when I saw you falling on those steps, I realized an empire is just a pile of cold stones if you're not in it. I leaned in, my forehead resting against hers. The contract is dead, I whispered. I don't want a year. I don't want a fake marriage. I want you. You don't even like me, she teased, though her voice was thick with emotion. I adore you, I corrected, my voice rough with the truth. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to worry about a bill, a debt, or you're a man like Silas ever again. I reached up, pulling her head toward me. Then stop talking, Julian, she whispered. I didn't need a second invitation. I kissed her, not for the cameras, not for the inheritance, but for the man I was becoming because of her.